皆様こんばんは。これよりアーツワーカーズラボ現場の視点で考える AI の諸外国の動向についてのヒアリング勉強会を始めます。こちらは本年6月20日に実施したZoomを公開用に編集したもので、個人が映っている箇所を拡大編集しているため、多少画像が荒くなっている部分がございます。あらかじめご了承をお願いいたします。なお、録音・録画・スクリーンショット及び転載・転用につきましては、不法行為に該当する可能性がございますので、禁止でお願いいたします。このアーカイブは全部で47分程度になります。それでは、これより開始いたします。はい。本日はお忙しい中、AI 諸外国の動向についてのヒアリング勉強会にご参加いただきまして、誠にありがとうございます。はい。今回、主催をしております、一般社団法人日本芸能従事者協会理事の代表理事の森崎めぐみと申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。今般 AI が急速に推進されたことで、当協会の会員から不安の声が寄せられました。そこから取り組みを始めて、5月4日、ユニグローバルユニオンから連帯声明をいただき、4日後に記者会見をいたしました。次お願いします。それからアンケートを開始しました。その後20日間で26,891名の回答がありました。正直なところ回答数の多さに非常に驚きました。次お願いします。回答者の職種は美術家が一番多く、次に文筆クリエイター、芸能従事者の実演家とスタッフ、報道関係者、ジャーナリストの順に多かったんですが、自由記述から推測すると、実際に一番多かったのは、その他の中のイラストレーターの方々と思われ、芸能従事者同様、立場が弱く、著作権で保護されにくい方々が一番被害に遭っているということがよくわかりました。次お願いします。AI の推進で仕事が減少する心配がある方が6割近く、AI による権利侵害などの弊害に不安があるという方が約 94% と想像通りではありましたが、この時点で政府からクリエイターに対しての保護が見られなかったことで無理もない結果だったのではと思います。次お願いします。不安の内容は勝手に利用される 91.9%、24,034名。次に権利がなくなる 64%、16,749名。そして技術が奪われる、やる気がそがれる、それぞれ約6割、約16,000名。その他、仕事が減る、報酬が安くなるが、約 50%、約13,000名です。次お願いします。これらの詳細は自由記述で報告がされました。被害の詳細はイラスト、絵、漫画、アニメーション、声、顔、文章、小説、翻訳などを学習された、盗作された、技術を取られた、犯罪だと思う、 創作意欲がそがれた、メンタルのダメージがあった、仕事が減った、なくなった、2099名が、権利や知的財産の侵害、モラルの侵害、児童ポルノ、アダルトなどに利用されたなど、また、自由記述から受けられた回答者が、イラストレーター、絵描き、美術家、漫画家、小説家、音楽家、声優、モデル、翻訳家、俳優、写真家、ゲーム制作者、作家、その他になっております。次お願いします。この被害の実例と寄せられた要望の自由記述14,500回答を反映した要望書を内閣府経産省文化庁に提出いたしました。簡単にご説明いたしますと、まず、著作権法上の表現者が出演、創作、制作したコンテンツの学習の禁止。2、実演家が発する演技や声などを実演家の人格に帰属する権利と定義し、実演家の利益を侵害しないこと。3、許諾のない AI 生成コンテンツの販売禁止。4、学習や生成を拒否する手立ての開発とそれに関する法整備。5、4月5月の国会、文部科学委員会で議論されて付帯決議がつけられた、著作権者の許諾が必要とされる著作権法、第30条の4における著作者の利益を不当に害することとなる場合の明確化。6、クリエイターはフリーランスが多いため、権利侵害に法的解決に裁判が現実的ではないため、司法によらない救済策の整備。7、AI 生成をする、業者や権利侵害防止のための行政による管理監督。8、元来、契約書がない文化芸術芸能分野にも有効なトラブル防止策の徹底。9、当事者の知見に基づく被害相談窓口などの設置。10、当事者の知見に基づく被害相談窓口などの設置。10、デジタル化 AI などの仕事の減少などで生活に影響が出ているクリエイターに対する保護及び調査分析。11、ユネスコや EU など国際機関が示しているデジタル対応に批准することなどが要望の内容になっております。次お願いします。そして、昨日文化庁の AI と著作権に関するセミナーが開催され、類似性や依拠性に関してなど踏み込んだ言及もありましたが、その見解を踏まえた上で思うことは、著作権法を立法したそもそもの目的である著作権者を保護するということで文化の発展に寄与するという観点が少し足りないのではないかと思っております。次お願いします。2021年の総務省の資料にユネスコの AI 倫理勧告案がありました。次お願いします。AI に対してもユネスコの価値と原則にのっとった使い方にするべきと言っています。価値には人間の尊厳、人権と自由の尊重、平和と共存が含まれ、10項目の中には、非礼性、無害性、安全安心、公正、無差別、持続可能性、プライバシーとデータの保護、次のページに、丸6に、人間による監督と決断として、常に倫理的、法的責任を特定可能とするべきとし、生死に関わる決定は AI システムに委ねるべきではないなどが書かれています。次お願いします。さらに、政策措置の中にも、丸2、倫理的ガバナンスと管理の項目などがあり、次のページお願いします。丸7、文化の項目に AI 技術を用いて創作された作品の知的財産権をいかに守る、あるいは守るべきか否かの決定など、AI と知財の交差点において、新たな研究を促進すべき。丸10、経済と労働の項目に、労働市場や教育に関する影響の評価と対処。丸11、権利と社会的福利の項目として、人の健康の向上と生活の権利の保護を謳っています。素晴らしい取り組みだと思います。はい、ここで、ご参加いただいている方の中から、衆議院議員の三谷秀秀先生から一言いただきたいと思います。三谷先生、よろしければぜひお願いいたします。
ただいまご紹介いただきました衆議院議員の三谷秀秀です。今日は、こういった AI に関する素晴らしい取り組み、講演を、開催していただきまして、本当にありがとうございます。森崎さんとは本当に以前からいろいろな形で、活動を一緒にさせていただいておりまして、今回の AI に関するさまざまな、 懸念点ですとか、そういったところも共有をさせていただいているところです。特にこの AI に関しては、本当に最近の急速な進歩に基づいて、それをどうやって、それをある意味、制御していくのかということについては、しっかりと考えていかなければいけないと。特にこの、著作権に関して言えばですね、それをしっかりと、クリエイターの方に利益を還元することで次の創作活動につなげていくというのが著作権法の元々の考え方であるわけですけれども、果たして今の著作権法がそういったことができるような形になっているのか、そのできないとすればどういう対応をしていく必要があるのかを含めてしっかりと議論していかなければいけないというふうに考えております。そういう意味では日本の我が国では、この著作権法上、比較的このディープラーニングですとか、そういった多くの画像、そういったテキストを読み込んでいく、そういったことについての法的な規制というのは、他の国々に比べると緩い法体系にはなっているところではありますけれども、それのいい部分っていうのは当然ながらあるんだろうとも思っています。ただ一方で、なかなかそういったことを無法図にやっていくことによる弊害というのも目を向けていかなければいけない。特にこれだけ現場のクリエイターの方々が心配をしてくださっているということの状況ですから、特に日本の中だけを考えるのではなくて、諸外国の例というものをしっかりと見ていきながらですね、その考えていかなければいけないというふうに思っています。今日はUNI グローバルユニオンのヨハネス・ステュディンガーさんにこの現地のお話をお聞かせいただけるというふうに思っておりますので、ぜひともですね、そういった話、ちょっとこの後僕も行かなきゃいけないので、後ほど森崎様から共有をしていただいて、しっかりと学んでいければと思っておりますので、しっかりと、この問題、私も取り組んでいきたいと思っておりますので、本日のご清開誠におめでとうございます。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
ありがとうございました。ぜひ引き続きよろしくお願いいたします。ありがとうございます。では、ヨハネス、今の、お言葉に何かお返事がありましたらお願いいたします。
So, well, thank you for having me. I keep my introduction as short as possible. My name is Johannes. I'm the head of the Secretariat for the Media, Entertainment and Arts sector in UNI Global Union. In our sector, we have about 140 plus union and guilds that represent creatives as well as technical and other behind-the-scene workers in commercial television, public television, in film and TV production, and in live entertainment, like live performance, ballet, opera, etc. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to exchange with you, learn from you, and also share some of our experience with the work of our writer colleagues and on AI. Looking forward to the meeting today.
それでは、いただいている質問に早速入ってまいりたいと思います。スライドをお願いいたします。私どもは、今、現在、ストライキがかなり長引いていますけれども、こちらの WGA アメリカ脚本家組合のストライキに連帯する声明を出しています。次お願いします。まず、このストライキにつきまして、質問をいたします。現在、ストライキをしているアメリカ脚本組合 WGA は、ユニグローバルユニオンに加盟しています。このストライキにつきまして、ヨハネスに伺ってまいりたいと思いますが、すみません。まず、この組合員にとって主な問題や課題は何でしょうか。また、WGA が使用者と交渉している要求は何ですか。お願いいたします。
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, that's a very important situation that we are facing at the moment. Just to remind you that the Writers Guild in the US, that are two guilds actually, the Writers Guild East and the Writers Guild West represent together about 12,000 professional screenwriters. They're on strike since 2nd of May. Before the strike began, the Writers Guilds negotiated together with the employers that represent literally everyone that produces in the US, from Disney to Netflix to Amazon to Apple to ABC, all the networks and all the studios for 6 weeks. And the key demands for the writers have been to adapt the conditions, the pay, and the regulations to the digital world, to the shift from what was called a TV model to a streaming model. So there are three key demands. There are, of course, more, but I would name three key demands for the Writers Guild. One is fair remuneration for streaming. The second one is to include the use, consent, and compensation for the use of artificial intelligence. And the third one is to address work pressure, very short deadlines, the reduction of how many writers write for a show, for how much time, a lot of pressure that all come from the streaming model that is imposed and is now the majority, the overwhelming model for creative works. So the main challenge is really to get the employers back to the negotiating table, and that leads into your second question, Megumi, about the process of negotiations. The problem has been that the employers, and it's a sectoral body, the employers have refused to address those three challenges and demands that I just mentioned: remuneration, work pressure, and AI. They refused to really engage in those, and that caused the strike. In the meantime, the Directors Guild, that represents all the directors and the directors' teams, have been successful in negotiating a new agreement at the end of May. And now the Screen Actors Guild, all the actors, performers, are negotiating with the employers also for a new contract. And those negotiations are set to expire on the 30th of June. Until that day, we do not expect any formal or informal exchange between the employers and the writers. In the meantime, during the time that the writers have been on strike, the directors have negotiated their agreement with the employers, with the same employers. This is now a deal done. And now, currently, in the month of June, the actors, performers, are negotiating with the same employers, also for a contract. These are separate negotiations.
Okay.
And they last the latest until end of June. And until that negotiation is not over, there will be no formal contact or informal contact between the writers and the employers, unfortunately.
では、とりあえず、次の質問に参りたいと思います。EU の AI 法についてです。3番といたしまして、EU の AI 法の対象になる主な内容は何でしょうか。お願いします。
Yes, it's a very complex legislation. To start, it has not yet been finalized. The objective is to finalize the legislation by the end of this year. That is a very ambitious time goal, but this is what the EU institutions have set. By the end of this year, they want to adopt the legislation. The legislation covers, in particular, defines what AI is, tries to ensure that those systems respect the fundamental rights that are laid down in the laws of the European Union, but also wants to promote innovation and investment in those AI applications and systems. So I want to highlight only two aspects. There are many, many more, but because we don't have that much time, I want to highlight two aspects that are important for workers in our industry. So the AI legislation follows what is called a high-risk approach, meaning that if AI that is used or introduced qualifies as high risk, then there will be a lot of obligations that the developer of the AI or the user, the AI needs to ensure, so that the implementation of AI is considered safe in respect of fundamental rights. And there are two areas where this is important. One is copyright, and the other one is more largely rights of workers in their employment. So, for instance, on copyright, there is a obligation of transparency when it comes to the use of deep fakes and other creative works. And this aims to ensure that the use of content is not infringing the use of copyright protected work, but it also tries to ensure that there is no use of content without consent. In this respect, what we are working together with the musician, actors, writers, and others is to ensure that not only there is transparency, consent, but also compensation, meaning that if there is all those obligations of transparency and consent have been met, there needs also be a remuneration that is triggered by if AI is used based on the works from our members. So in the current text by the European Parliament, and that was not in the text proposed by the European Commission, who proposes legislation. The European Parliament text as it stands now provides for a duty to consult with workers and their unions, which is very important, before introducing AI into the workplace. It also contains a duty to carry out an assessment of the impact on fundamental rights of the introduction of AI. So that is also, reinforces the consultation, because you need to look at fundamental rights when you do that consultation with workers and unions. And last but not least, there is a possibility in the text for national legislators, so members of the European Union, national governments and their parliaments, to limit the use of AI to protect workers' rights. So beyond what the common rules are at the EU level, one member state could decide to protect even better, more strongly workers, and enact national legislation. And to finish on that question, that the European Trade Union Movement, the ETUC, and us, we want the text to be stronger, because all those duties depend on whether the AI would pose a significant risk. So only if the AI would consider a significant risk to fundamental rights or the safety of workers or their rights, then only then would be a consultation between the employer and the unions, which is a loophole, which we hope in the ongoing discussions about the AI Act will be closed as much as we can.
ありがとうございました。ちょっとでは、取り急ぎ、今、用意している質問を紹介していきたいと思います。次のページお願いいたします。次はですね、情報ロレンさんからの質問ですが、生成、企業、5番ですよね。5番ですかね。ごめんなさい。生成 AI に関するグローバルな規制の可能性について、生成 AI に関するグローバルな規制をどのように作るべきか、ルール作りにあたり、どのような規制が想定されるでしょうかということです。
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's also a very difficult question because we are at the very beginning of that process. There are different international organizations that can enact rules. Again, at this moment, I propose to focus on two, on workers' rights and on copyright. And in that framework, the protection of works for their use, including by AI, legislation or regulation would be generated by WIPO. However, this framework is very lengthy. It takes a long time. For instance, we have been discussing for more than 20 years better protection for broadcasters against piracy, which we support, of course, to better protect broadcasters against piracy. But still, there is not a legal instrument at WIPO. So unfortunately, my view is that at this time, at the global level, at international level, norm setting to regulating AI is not likely to happen. What we probably will see is inspiration by international acts like from the European Union, maybe some important countries like Japan and the US, and then have those regulations be introduced in trade agreements to ensure that in trade between those countries who have legislated on AI, that in their trade, those regulations are respected. I think that is the more likely scenario than to expect that on copyright, better protection for the work of our members through AI, to protect them against the AI use in the global norm setting body of WIPO. That is less of a possibility at the moment. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it would take a long time because of the way WIPO is constructed. It takes a very long time, unfortunately.
ではもう一つ予定しておりました質問です。企業は AI を使ってどのような従業員情報を収集することができるのか、その際、性別などの生徳的な個人情報に加え、仕事の進め方やノウハウ、仕事の成果などの情報を収集する際に注意するべき点はあるのでしょうかです。
That's a very important question. Actually, as you all know, AI is already used very, very much in controlling almost every single form of interaction between an employer and employees. That already starts with the recruiting process. And there, of course, gender-specific issues, but also other issues that touch all aspects of a human being are used to analyze in a recruitment process based on AI the profile of candidates. So it already starts before you enter employment, when you are actually applying for a job. And then during your when you work, actually, there are many, especially during the COVID crisis, there were a lot of new instruments introduced, like for telework to survey workers working from home, keystrokes, capturing every like 5 minutes capture from the video camera to see whether you're working or not, and sometimes with very intrusive policies like people who are not active in front of screen would be reminded to go back to work, even though they might have been on the telephone with a coworker or a client or whatever. So a lot of intrusive, especially surveillance, but also performance AI that unfortunately in many jurisdictions are not illegal. Like in the United States, for instance, there has been, a lot of complaints, there are a lot of union actions, but actually the law doesn't prohibit the use of those technologies. That's why the EU IA Act for us is so important, because it will set a norm that will, safeguard some of those abusive practices from being deployed, or at least they will be subject to collective bargaining. And if I can conclude on that question, it's a very important question from our colleagues from ICTJ. What companies can do in terms of using AI to surveil, evaluate, assess, recruit, etc. Employees at the moment really depends in which national in which national jurisdictions they are, because there is no harmonized, there are no rules at regional or global level. And there are now two emerging, I would say, approaches. One is the typical US, very free, let it go, don't regulate too much. Where in some states, not at the federal level, but in quite a few states of the United States, federal states, the employer doesn't even need to inform the employee of the use of AI. In some, the employer has to, in others not. So that's why it's so important, the EU AI Act, that because it's a big block of industries and countries to adopt joint rules that actually oppose this very unregulated approach that is at the moment existing in the US. And then I go back to question number 5 on labor law. And then we as unions work through the ILO in order to work towards standards. And I will say a few words to that, just to say how much we can work with the companies and what we can do to stop them, or to at least frame it in collective bargaining. Yes. Okay. So that's why it's very important to use the framework of the ILO to work towards standards for the use of AI. In our sector, we had the technical meeting on the future of work in the media and entertainment and art sector, together with our colleagues of the musicians and the actors in February this year. And the conclusions to that meeting contain a paragraph to the AI, to the use of AI, which underlines that there needs to be regulation that is based on a human-centered approach to AI. And in the recommendations to the ILO for our sector, for the media and entertainment and art sector, there is recommendations to develop policy together with WIPO, UNESCO, and build a working group to work together with the employers and the unions on those questions.
ありがとうございます。すいません。お時間になってしまいましたが、 ヨハネス、大丈夫でしたら、もう一問残ってるので、続きよろしいでしょうか。
Yes, again, a very good question. It will always depend again on national or regional law, copyright law, but there is one common denominator really, is that if AI had access to an original work, you can prove that they had access to the original work, and then that the result of the AI process, or whatever the result is of the use of the work that has been used, when that is an output that doesn't really lead to a very significant new creative work, then definitely that is an infringement. But more importantly is the consent. That as if AI is used without consent by a creator or a group of creators to use their work, even to feed an AI application without consent, then that's a breach of copyright law. Now we are at the very beginning of infringement procedures in that sense, and it's very hard to see where the jurisprudence will go in this area. But at least that's my view. But I think we will see more and more cases where creators or even companies that own copyright works will try to protect better their works against the use of AI.
ありがとうございます。ちょっとお時間過ぎましたが、今、チャットの方に質問が来ておりまして、ヨハネスが時間の許す限り、ちょっと続けたいなと思います。
Okay. I assume that the rule to award to make awards to human creation only, well, it's of course we will support always that human creation is at the center of the entertainment industry. And then of course that rule is a good rule. I mean, in the music, because this is now music sector, in the music sector, what we do see is more and more AI generated music. And again, it's not for me. I mean, that would be more for my colleagues of the musicians to make, to take a position. But from what I see and when we discuss with our colleagues is that while you cannot stop even musicians and composers to use AI, it's one thing to use AI as part of human creation, and it's another thing to replace, to copy, or to use without consent human creation and to make an artwork. So in that sense, I think the rule by the Grammy is a good rule because it centers on the human creation. Yes, absolutely. There was a set of demands by the Writers Guild on AI. so the first important statement in the negotiations by the WGA was that they are not against the use of AI, but that AI needs to be shaped by collective bargaining. And for instance, AI can be used to, assist in screenwriting, in rewriting, in very different forms. And what the Writers Guild put forward is a set of proposals that would shape the use of AI in a way that protects the recognition of the work of the screenwriter. For instance, it's very important when it comes to credits, that there is also limits to what employers can ask of how AI is used to assist writers. And also, since it's a question of time, because an AI can work immensely quicker than any human being, but doesn't mean that it is leading to a creative process that is conducive to creation of an episode, a TV episode, or a cinema work, which are complex. So there are a set of demands that or proposals, I would say, that the WGA has made that are quite complex and but straightforward during the negotiations as an opening. One demand, for instance, to give just one example of the WGA, is that AI is not used, or that material that screenwriters have written in the past or are writing, that this material cannot be used to train AI. And here you come to the copyright issue, because that's a consent issue. However, in the United States, the copyright lies with the producers. That's a difference to many countries, but because of the bargaining power, that's a demand. So it's a demand not based on law, because the copyright is with the producer, but it's saying, we are the screenwriters, we created those scripts. We do not want to consent that you as employer use those scripts and feed them to the AI so that the AI could use our work to potentially build rewrites, etc. That's one demand among the many, but just to give a very, very clear example of what that is. There was a proposal that is that has been put forward by the writers during the negotiations. To be more precise, the exact proposal was that any material, meaning any scripts or material that has aided or helped to produce scripts, that are governed by the collective bargaining agreement, meaning any production that in the past, now, or in the future has been made and is subject to the collective bargaining agreement between the producers, studios, TV networks, and the Writers Guild. These materials cannot be used by the employers to train any AI application for screenwriting purposes. And this is really derived from the authorship and creativity doctrine, meaning that human creation is human creation, and it should not be used to train an application that potentially seeks to replace that creation. And I think personally, as with any negotiations, that's an opening proposal. Now, this is really Johannes speaking, not that this is a formal comment or something, but you could see that if there could be some form of consent for which there is compensation, but that's true if there would be real bargaining. Just to give you the idea how much the employers are unwilling to engage, is that their response during the negotiations to the very detailed proposals by the WGA on AI was, let's have a meeting once a year.
そしたら、じゃあ、ヨハネスから最後に一言ご感想か、何かちょっと一言お願いいたします。
Yes, of course. I mean, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak to my Japanese colleagues today. That's a big honor and privilege. Maybe the next time I can listen more to you, because also you might want to inform me a bit more, of course, what's going on. I also hope that we can at some point meet in Japan again. It has a long time that UNI has not been in Japan, and to consult with affiliates, not only in the sector, but with everyone. And I hope that you will be successful in reinforcing not only copyright, but also help us move towards strong protection of workers and creators when AI is used. And all I can say is whatever we can do, humbly, of course. We are not super women and men in UNI, but and in the cooperation with other unions across the world to reinforce workers' rights in the face of AI and to reinforce copyright. We are here to help to work with you and to reinforce cooperation also with sister unions throughout the world. Thank you so much.
ありがとうございます。大変有意義であったんではないかなと思います。また、お言葉に甘えて、ぜひ次も考えてまいりたいと思いますが、では、最後にできる方、ぜひ、画面をオンにして、最後、お別れをしたいと思います。ヨハネス、本当に今日はどうもありがとうございました。では、これにて終了したいと思います。本日は誠にどうもありがとうございました。ご協力いただいた皆様も本当にありがとうございます。失礼いたします。
Thank you so
very
much.
much. ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Johannes.